America is a park I almost skipped, and I'm so glad I didn't. Now, the reason I almost skipped Six Flags America is because I made a trip planning to hit Six Flags Great Adventure, Hershey Park, along with a couple other parks in that area. And Six Flags America was a park that I originally didn't think I was going to visit just because I heard a lot of bad stuff about the park, that it wasn't the most clean, the rides were just average, stuff along those lines. But the reason I ended up visiting Six Flags America is because I realized it was cheaper for me to visit Six Flags Great Adventure and Six Flags America and buy a season pass than it was to just buy a normal ticket to Six Flags Great Adventure. It ended up being a better value, and because of that, I visited Six Flags America, and I ended up enjoying my trip to Six Flags America, and in this video, I will be explaining why Six Flags America is worth a trip. So stay tuned. So let's start off with Six Flags America's coaster lineup. Starting with their headlining attraction, we have Superman Ride of Steel. Now this is a hyper coaster, any coaster over 200 feet that also reaches speeds of over 70 miles per hour and is quite a long ride with some pretty powerful airtime. Now despite all those amazing aspects of the ride, this ride is far from perfect, as even though your upper body will feel very exposed on this ride, your lower body is very restricted, and therefore you might get some shin pain or other leg pain during the ride. Though, even despite that, it's still a great ride. So moving on to Six Flags America's other headlining coasters, you have Batwing, which is a Vekoma flying coaster, and this ride is a very good ride. It's surprisingly smooth considering it's a Vekoma, and delivers some crazy positive G-forces, including at the bottom of the first drop. The positive G-forces make you feel like you're going to get thrusted into the ground. And let me just tell you, that is a pretty freaky sensation. But other than that, this ride does have a very strong layout and is overall a very good flying coaster. And then moving on to our other main headlining coaster, in my opinion, you have Joker's Jinx. Now this is a launch coaster and it has a pretty forceful launch and also heads you through 4 different inversions, and overall is actually a pretty scary ride because this thing is super compact, and during the ride you get very close to various different supports, and because of all those head choppers, it is kind of scary, not gonna lie, because you really do feel like you're about to hit those supports. Then you have the park's 2 wooden coasters, that being Wild One and Roar. Now, Wild One is definitely the much better coaster, and it's actually kind of surprising considering this thing is well over 100 years old, as it opened back in 1917, and despite its age, it's running quite smoothly and delivers some decent pops of floater airtime, and is overall a very solid wooden coaster. Now, in terms of smoothness, I can't say the same thing about Roar, as that thing is fairly rough. Now, it's far from the roughest wooden coaster I've ridden, as I've ridden a couple other more rough coasters, but it's just not the most pleasant experience. And also, the layout doesn't really give much in terms of forces. You get some decent positive Gs, but you don't really get a ton of airtime, and it's not necessarily a bad ride, but it is quite underwhelming. Then let's move on to our other piece of garbage, and that being Firebird. Now, you kind of got to give this ride some slack considering it was the first coaster by the roller coaster manufacturer B&M, but other than that, this thing is pretty rough. And honestly, I could tolerate it because I know how to ride these things, and if you want to make Firebird a more tolerable experience, just keep your head forward, so then the headbanging should be less. But then other than that, the ride does deliver some decent positive Gs considering it's not the tallest or fastest ride out there, and overall has a solid layout even though it's on the shorter side. But if you are crunched on time, rides like Firebird and Roar are definitely worth skipping. And then let's move on to some of our family coasters. Let's first start with Raging Cajun, which is the park's spinning wild mouse coaster. And let me just tell you, the layout isn't anything special, but this thing can really get you spinning. In that second half when the cars unlock, this thing really starts spinning and it is pretty wild. Now note, like any spinning coaster, especially with this one, it can get you dizzy. So if you're prone to dizziness, this might be a ride that's worth skipping. But other than that, it's a great family coaster. And then you have the park's kiddie coaster, which is the Great Chase. And this thing is really nothing special. It's just a cloned kiddie coaster layout. and it's great for them little ones, but other than that, it's not really special. Let's move on to the park's invert coaster, which is Mind Eraser, which is currently closed and you can't find it on the park's website or mobile app, so it's probably going to be removed soon. And this ride I did skip when I went to Six Flags America, but I had every reason in the world to skip it because I've heard nothing but bad things about this ride. Now, this coaster, it does have a pretty solid looking layout, but I've just heard it's like the roughest piece of garbage alive. And what's funny about the fact that I skipped this thing is, so on my trip to Six Flags America, I also later on headed up to New Jersey, and because I skipped out on Mind Eraser, I was originally planning on heading up to Maury's Piers and doing the Great Nor'easter. But what's funny is, when I got up to Maury's Piers to do the Great Nor'easter, which is the same exact ride as this, just with some minor modifications, and due to a retrack and new trains is much smoother than this one, it was closed. So I have yet to do a Vekoma SLC, and honestly, it is kind of sad that I never got to do the Great Nor'easter, because I've heard that ride is very smooth for a Vekoma SLC, and because of that, I've also heard these rides do have fairly forceful layouts, so I wish I got to experience the Great Nor'easter. But that's besides the topic on this video. So overall, Six Flags America has a very solid coaster lineup. Though it's not like amazing, it's still very solid. Moving on to Six Flags America's flat ride lineup. Now, I sadly never got to experience any of these while I was at Six Flags America, but they have a frisbee ride known as Harley Quinn's Spinsanity, and this was when the attractions closed for me at Six Flags America, which I got pretty lucky at Six Flags America, and not many attractions were closed or broke down, which is definitely turns out to be a rarity at this place, as I've heard many stories of people having many attractions be closed or broken down on their visits, which never happened to me. And Harley Quinn's Spinsanity is a frisbee ride and looks to be a very solid ride, delivering some good float airtime and positive G-forces, but other than that, it's really just your standard frisbee ride. Then you have the park's drop tower, which is Voodoo Drop. Now, this isn't a super tall drop tower, only about 140 feet high, but it does seem to deliver a pretty forceful drop, and for that, it's a pretty solid ride. And then you have the park's tower swing ride, known as Wonder Woman Lasso of Truth. And this thing will lift you up over 200 feet in the air, and these things, honestly, are some of the most terrifying flat rides I've ever ridden, just because you're suspended that high in the air only by chains on a small seat. So coming from my experience, these things are terrifying. And then you also have Bourbon Street Fireball, which for some reason the park wants to claim as a roller coaster, even though it's not. It's just your standard Larson Super Loop, and these things are nothing special in terms of flat rides. So for that, the park does have a solid flat ride collection, even though none of these flat rides really stand out as like incredible must-do flat rides. So moving on to the park's water park, which is Hurricane Harbor. Now, one thing that's nice with Hurricane Harbor is it is included with your park admission, and because, at least for me, when I visited Six Flags America, it was freaking scorching hot outside, so I definitely made sure to do this. Now, they don't have a ton of amazing attractions. You do have some solid raft slides, including a tornado slide and a couple more standard family raft slides. Then you also have their main attraction, which is known as Bonsai Pipelines. And this was sadly closed for me. And it's really sad because this was the main slide that I wanted to do. And it's their set of trapdoor slides. And these things look fairly intense, as most trapdoor slides are fairly intense body slides. Like I've mentioned throughout this video, Six Flags America, including their water park, don't have like amazing attractions, but they're not bad attractions at all. And I definitely recommend visiting Hurricane Harbor, especially if you're visiting during the summertime and it's very hot out. It's definitely a worthwhile water park to visit. Though it's not like amazing, it's still a solid water park, nevertheless. Now let's move on to the food and cleanliness of Six Flags America. Now these are two aspects of most Six Flags parks that are typically subpar, and Six Flags America is no exception, as the food is just your standard amusement park food. Nothing special. And as for the cleanliness, this was one thing that used to be criticized heavily on Six Flags America for, and I will admit it's not the best looking Six Flags park I've been to, but it's definitely way more clean than reports that I've heard about the park from like 10 years ago. So the park has definitely improved in both the food and cleanliness aspect over the past 10 years from what I've heard, but from my experience, this place is just average in both these categories like most Six Flags parks. So not bad, but on par with every other Six Flags park I've been to. So if you enjoyed this video, I just want to thank you for watching the video, and remember to like and share this video with anybody you know who will be visiting Six Flags America soon. And also remember to subscribe to Southeastern Thrills and check out my video comparing Six Flags Great Adventure to Hershey Park, because if you're visiting Six Flags America, there's a good chance you might also be visiting either Six Flags Great Adventure or Hershey Park, not too far north of Six Flags America. Just thank you for watching this video, and peace.